We're recording. A live stream to Facebook. Yeah, it's failed
No, no.
previously, so let's see how it goes. Mhm.
Technology is not so much fun.
It's true, but we try, and when it does work, it works well.
It's
So
great. It's great when it works.
exactly. So I'm now Facebook. A second.
I can do it. I'll do it.
All right. I think we are live with some video signal. Just give that. Perfect. We are currently live right now.
Hey.
It's working, so that's amazing. Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Traei, and thank you so much for joining us today. I am the founder of Her Stories Untold, and it's a global initiative dedicated to sharing empowering and inspiring stories of women from all walks of lives. Her Stories Untold is proudly in association with Her Journey Empowerment Society, a nonprofit organization dedicated to uplifting and celebrating the diverse journeys and stories of individuals around the globe. The initiative began as a way to bring visibility to the incredible journeys that have taken to become whom they are today. So many of these stories go untold, not because they aren't significant, but because the individuals themselves often don't realize the power and importance of their experiences. So, our mission is to uplift, empower, and inspire women globally. If you feel that you have a story to share or anyone else's story to share, I invite you to visit www.herstoriesuntold.com. And before we dive into today's conversation, I want to acknowledge that the land on which I live and work is the traditional and unceded territory of the Coquitlam Nation and lies within the shared territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, Squamish, Kiket, and Stolo First Nations. As well, today is a day of observation. It happens to be the World Youth Skills Day, a United Nations day that reminds us just how vital it is to empower the next generation, especially young women with the skills and stories that can shape their future. So, welcome to Her Stories Untold, where we uncover journeys behind resilience, leadership, and reinvention. And today, I am joined by Lauren Wittenberg Weiner, and she is a psychologist, an entrepreneur, and military spouse who became an accidental entrepreneur after restarting her career overseas. Okay. Um, she co-founded one of the largest woman-led government contracting firms. And in the United States, scaling it to nearly 100 million in annual revenue before its acquisition in 2022. Um, just and Lauren holds a PhD in psychology from Dartmouth and is the founder of In Gear Career, now part of Hiring Our Heroes, and co-founder of Homefront Rising, which empowers military spouses to run for office and lead in the public life. Her forthcoming book, Unruly, blends her personal journey and leadership insights into a powerful call to defy expectations and design a life on your own terms. Lauren speaks widely on work-life integrations, reinventions, and empowering women and military spouses through meaningful rule-breaking leadership. And by the way, her book officially made the bestsellers list, number 7 in USA Today overall for fiction and nonfiction, number 3 on Publishers Weekly for nonfiction, and number 2 on Bookscan Business for the last week. So, so welcome here, Lauren.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
That's amazing. And yeah, so I'm here. I'm very excited because I want to find out how you went from being told you couldn't work as a military spouse to building $100 million government contracting firm, and then learning about rewriting those rules and redefining purpose and the courage to do it in your own way. So, um, just to, start off, Lauren, you've worn many hats: military, spouses, CEO, caregiver, writer. But beyond the titles, there's a story. Why did you want to share it now? Like, was there a
I
particular moment when you realized you were ready to tell the story publicly?
so I think I've been telling the story publicly pretty much the whole time. I'm kind of an open book, and I've been because the story was kind of unfolding fairly publicly as we got more contracts and more stuff. And I love speaking to audiences. I love kind of talking to people. We've been talking about this story, and we've been talking about particularly the use of non-traditional labor pools since we started the firm 22 years ago now. And so, or 21 years ago now. So it's been an amazing journey that I've been able to kind of share throughout. But then once we sold the company, I just kind of started writing just as a way to get the words out of my head and out of my heart and onto paper. I mean, I was, you know, now not the CEO of a firm that I had been the CEO of for 18 years. It had been part of me since before I had kids. And so, that changeover was difficult. At the same time, I was managing the kind of transition of my cousin had a glioblastoma, which came back 5 days after the company was sold. And so I just started writing, really just more therapeutic for myself, honestly. And then when Jamie passed, I was like, I kind of want to do something with this. I kind of want to make this into something more than just my own therapy. And so I started looking at how to publish a book, how that worked, how to get a book deal and all that kind of stuff. I got a book deal from a phenomenal publisher. I had a phenomenal editor who worked with me from early conception all the way through to, I talked to her yesterday. So actually, I think I texted her with her this morning. So she's been with me through the entire book deal. And it's been a great journey to tell the story and really reconceive of some of the stuff that we've been talking about for years and really think about why we were able to be so successful. And really kind of conceive of that through this unruly lens.
That's amazing. So, you know, I guess my question is like, what made you feel most empowered? Like what changed within yourself and others around you after you kind of started sharing your story?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I think when I was younger, I think there were a lot of people who told me I couldn't do stuff, right? That they were very much gatekeepers of, even in graduate school, it was, you're not doing things the right way, you're not hitting the milestones, whatever. Even though I didn't really want to do it the same way that they did it. And so I was kind of stifled for it. When I worked in the White House for about 4 years before I started the company. And when I got to the White House, I got a little bit more freedom to kind of explore some of the rules, literally, because I was in the White House rulemaking office. And so I started realizing there was a lot more space to be had where you don't break those rules. And so it became, and then as as somebody told me no, I kind of went, well, I don't really want to take that no for an answer. Like, I'm not, yeah, that no might be true, but let me push on it a little bit. Let me figure out, without ever breaking the rules, how do I get to a yes? Is there a different way to get to a yes? And so I kind of realized, I think, through some of the times at the White House, and then certainly when I got to Europe and followed my husband on his military orders, when people were telling me no, I was like, yeah, I don't accept that. I really just no. That's not the way that I'm gonna. It doesn't have to be that way. And so I would, and I talk a lot about this in the book. Obviously, I would go back to the rules and say, you said that's against the rules, but it's not, right? And so where does it say that? And if it doesn't say that, then I'm going to push you and I'm going to say, no, 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 I'm going to try to do this. So it kind of opened up doors for me once I started realizing people would say that things were against the rules. People would say that's not how you do things. And honestly, it didn't matter because that might not be how they did things, but it's going to be how I do things.
That's very interesting. So, I kind of want to learn a little bit more about your career. So, you were a military spouse, and your husband went to, where did you guys go? Italy?
So we were in Italy. He was actually a civilian at the time. He had been in the military, but by the time I married him, he was a civilian working for the Navy. And his old boss called him and said, "Hey, would you like to come to Italy on military orders?" And
Yeah,
so we went to. I thought was right around when Under the Tuscan Sun came out. So I
yeah,
was like, "Oh, this is going to be great. Italy. It's going to be rolling hills. It's going to be," and it was Naples, which
yeah,
is very different than Tuscany.
yeah.
And so we got over there, and I kid you not, we landed. They took us the back way, straight from the airport. They took us the back way to his office. They didn't give us a chance to like go freshen up, take a nap, anything. We went straight to his office, and it was through a back alley. There was a
Yeah.
huge dumpster at the beginning of the back alley.
Okay.
And it's Naples, so there's a trash strike because it's Naples and there's always a trash strike. And so the
Yeah.
dumpster is overflowing, and it's overflowing, no kidding, like taller than a person for probably 3 city blocks. And the garbage is on fire. So I turned to my husband and my brand new husband, right? We had just gotten married like
Right.
a month before.
Yeah.
After 4 days of being engaged, we got married because I needed to be on his military orders. And I turned to him, I'm like, what have you done to me? I came out of my dream job in the White House, and I'm like, it's a dumpster fire. It's an actual, no kidding dumpster fire. And then it just got worse because I got there, that was, I think, Friday or whatever day it was. That Monday, I went on base and talked to the HR office, and they were like, "Oh yeah, no, military spouses don't get to work on base except as a secretary until you have babies." And this is 2004. This is not 1974.
Hmm.
So, and I was like, "Oh, this is not going to work for me. No, this is not going to work for me."
Wow. So basically, you had a career,
It
full
did.
thriving career.
Yeah.
You got married. Then you went overseas to Italy as a military spouse, and which is very much about restarting your career after a break. So,
Yeah.
this question about many women experiencing career pauses, whether for caregiving, raising children, or following a
Sure.
partner's military assignment, I think pretty much you faced all of that while overseas, right? So, I wanted to you live this reality many military spouses face, career momentum interrupted by deployment or relocation. So, I guess what was the hardest part of restarting your career overseas, and what was the first step someone in that situation can take? And how was it like to, rebuild the confidence after moving out
Yeah.
of your full-time career, basically shifting?
Yeah, so I never completely stopped. I mean, I kept going at least somewhat. I would, there were a couple of universities on base, so I taught a class here and there. I got a contracting job right away, so I didn't do well because I could not sit home. I was not built for it. I think I would have been divorced 3 minutes after we got there if I had tried to sit home. I tried to go on a couple of USO tours, and they were great, but I just didn't do well with it. So I tried to keep myself busy, but it still wasn't enough, and it still wasn't fulfilling enough. So I kind of just I sat down and said, okay, what options do I have? And the things that kind of presented themselves, I think a lot of people, they presented themselves to a lot of different people. I just was able to kind of notice them and jump on them. And so I think you have to be open to entirely different options than you've considered before. And I think you have to explore them and keep your mind very much open to, the story I tell about kind of the founding of the firm was somebody turned to me. I had incorporated the firm just to have a shell of something to work back in the States to do some consulting work. And somebody turned to me and they said, "Hey, you've got a firm and you're really smart. Can you do some analysis for me?" I'm like, "Sure." "On what?" And he was like, "Anti-terrorism force protection."
Hmm.
And I kid you not, I had done low income housing policy. Or all of housing policy, really. I had done education policy. I had done health policy. I had done food and nutrition policy. I'd done all of the kind of touchy feely, kind of domestic social policy areas. I had never done anything with the military. I had no idea what anti-terrorism was. I mean, this was 2004, so just after 9/11, just after 9/11, we're starting to get into some of this stuff, and I don't know anything about it. And I was like, "Sure, I'll figure it out." And I had a way to figure it out. I knew I had somebody who was looking for me to do stuff. He said, "I'll give you everything that you need to do. I just need someone who's got a smart kind of head on their shoulders for analysis to do this work, but I'll give you all the stuff that you need." Like, sure. I think most people would have second guessed themselves and would have said no to that because it was so far out of their comfort zone. And so I think that's probably the biggest lesson in restarting is you've got to be open to something that is non-traditional, something that is not what you expected it to be. But it might end up leading you. I didn't intend to start a firm. I really never did. And we ended up growing it, like you said, to $100 million in annual revenue because at various points throughout, we were open to new options that presented themselves that we knew we could do, but it was going to take a little bit of kind of navigating to be able to do it well.
And how many years did it take to build up to that 100 million point?
18 years. We
18 years.
from the start to the finish was 18 years.
Wow, that's outstanding. And I'm reading your book, there was this line where you were talking about building the path and burning the boat. I feel like this kind of aligns to that, you were
Yes.
building the path. You want to kind of expand a little bit
Yeah.
of
So
that?
so I talk a lot about and particularly with people who are shifting what they're doing, lots of people coming out of the military, retiring or what have you, about lines in the water. And I don't know where I came up with this because I'm not a fisherman, but like I can't fish to save my life. But the idea of having different kind of fishing lines in the water, different options on the table that you can pursue, different paths through anything, and keeping there's a balance between keeping everything open, keeping all options open, and being so totally overwhelmed and resource depleted that you have to find one or two options that you're really actively pursuing, keep some of them that don't take too many resources kind of warm, and then foreclose the ones that don't make sense to you. But if you're keeping those options open, well, first of all, I keep hearing this analogy of burn your boat, which is this idea that if you really want to get somewhere, you have to kind of burn the ability to go backwards, right? That you cannot make a different choice in order to kind of grit it out and keep going so that you don't have any excuse to say no. And I think it's a terrible idea. Honestly, I really do, because things change.
Yeah.
And if you've burned your boat, if you've burned all options except the one you're pursuing, truly what ends up happening is even if you get to that option, you've had to make so many compromises to get to that option that you wouldn't have had to make if you had other options on the table, even if you're pursuing that option as your primary option. If you know you've got other options, you don't have to take everything that's handed to you and compromise as much. I think there's the ability to both pounce on new options and new opportunities that you never anticipated, and also to kind of make sure that you're not pursuing something that is going to end up hurting you in the long run, even if it's what you thought you wanted. Because there have been plenty of times in my career where I've turned around and said, you know what? What I thought I wanted, what I really did want, it's not working for me anymore. And so, and if you know that that could be an option, and you've kept some other options open, or you can open up some other options, it becomes possible to change what's not working for you anymore, even if it was the perfect thing before.
That's very true. So, in summary, like burning the boat isn't saying like, burn everything kind of thing, right? It's saying know your options,
Yes.
right? But choose that one path, stick with it, go forth with it. And know that this path, while you're walking and building it, it can change and shift, and then learning to pivot because you
Yes.
have these other options. And maybe you're going to create new options as you go
Yes.
along the way, but it won't be the same path that you were taking. So hence the idea and concept of burning the boat, so to speak,
Right.
right? It's
Right.
like packing up your bags to move to another country, but then having options like what is it gonna like? What happens if I move there and I have to do this and that? Like what does it take? What does that
Yep.
look like? Or if it changes, or maybe you move to another country, so to speak, right? So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
life
I mean,
is
literally or figuratively. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Look, there is never a straight path. I mean, um, I, I work around a lot of operational military guys, and they've got great sayings, right? There's all sorts of crazy sayings that these guys use, but one of them is no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And I love this saying because you can plan all you want, right? I am in the middle of some contingency stuff going on right now, and I've got plans upon plans upon plans. I've got my husband looked at me the other day because I was walking through. Okay, if this happens here, this is what we're going to do, and if it happens here, then this is what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to move everything around. And he looked at me and he was like, "It is." He was like, "You're like a military officer trying to plan every contingency." He's like, "You do realize you don't control any of this, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, but if I plan for it, I can control as much as I possibly can because that's my personality." But you
yeah,
do have to realize that no matter how much you plan, and plans are incredibly important, but
yeah,
no matter how much you plan, you have to be flexible to whatever comes up, be it something external or honestly something internal, which is just as important, if not more important, to like,
yeah.
hey, I thought I really wanted this. This is not what I wanted.
Yeah. And I love your share right now because I feel like I also have these contingency plans and I
Oh,
actually encourage. And then when I'm talking to people about things, I always kind of go to one extremity to the other kind of thing just to suss out, like what's going on, what was the worst case scenario and what not kind of thing. But I think it's not, I think the focus is not about being fixated on in what could go wrong, really.
yes.
I think the whole planning concept is very good actually, because it gives you the scope, the estimation of the scope of what could take shape, right?
Yes.
Which in essence really helps you prepare so that when, different things, situations come up, at least you have an idea because you kind of entertained it, right? In your
Yep.
in your mind, right?
Yep.
What you could do, right? And then of course in life, be prepared. Some things just come up ex unexpectedly and you kind of just go forth, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
which leads us to the next section, which, I kind of want to go into expand a little bit about embracing the unruly mindset, okay? I know from your book title, the word unruly might sound rebellious to some, but in your book, it's pretty much it becomes a beacon for women,
Mhm.
individuals to break free from limitations.
Yes.
So I want to ask you, what does it truly mean to be unruly in your mindset? And how do you begin to embrace that in a world that pressures, I guess, women to play nice and stay
Yeah.
small? I mean, it's not
Yes.
always the case, of course, right? But it's this general idea overview of that. And
Yes.
was there a rule you once followed that you later realized was holding you back?
Oh gosh, there were more rules than I can count that were holding me back. Look, I think the idea is of unruly generally is you have to follow the rules. I not everyone does follow the rules, and there are plenty of examples, I want to be really clear, of people who don't follow the rules and get away with it, right? We can point to a million examples in our own daily lives and kind of in the broader social milieu. But if you are the kind of good girl type that wants to follow the rules, that's who I am. And so I never break rules. But there are so many things that aren't actually rules. They're expectations, they're norms, they're doing what you think everyone else expects you to do. They are traditional paths that you might be able to find space within the rules by knowing the rules better than anyone else. Then you can find the space to kind of break out of those expectations, break out of those norms, break out of your own kind of shackles that you've put on yourself. And then once you do that, there's also this third component of it, which is more advocacy, which is when the rules stop working for you or for the broader society, then really when you know the rules better than anyone else, you know how to change the rules and you know how to make the world a lot fairer for the people around you, and for yourself. And so that the concept is really it's driven by morality, it's driven by a strong moral compass, and it is finding your own space to your own authentic path within those rules. And so once I realized that that was the case, I mean, look, I joke that I did everything everyone ever expected of me always, right? If they told me, here's how you get an A, but here's the extra credit so you can get an A plus plus, I would do the extra credit and then look for more extra credit, right? And it gets you far in school. It does. And it gets
Yeah.
you fairly far in life, right? If you sit and you follow the rules, you can do pretty well for yourself. But you can't get to that breakout success. And honestly, I think more so than that, you can't get to your own authentic version of yourself. And you're going
Mm.
to get burnt out because you're doing something that everyone else expects. And so it's not authentic to you. So it's only when you break out of those shackles without breaking the rules that you find that space that is where you can breathe, where you can find what you want to do. And so that's really what that unruly mindset is and is about.
I think it's very powerful because it's like you have this box of rules, and then of course you learn all these rules and you know how to navigate and move around in it and what to do with it kind of thing. But then kind of breaking out of that box, not to say not to follow the box, but to expand
Yes.
additionally, right? So to
Yes.
grow so that you can go beyond just the box concept of thinking, right? Of things you do. And I think probably in the case maybe for your company, if you had stay in the box of, just trying out or following these things, you wouldn't be able to expand out to this 100
Absolutely
million
not. Yeah.
capacity, right? Kind of thing. So because you had to, you know what, we're gonna give it a shot. We're gonna try these things out, that type of thing, right? So
Yep.
um there was a quote in your book that I love. It says, "Those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those who are doing it." So if you want
I
to talk
love
about
that because one of my favorite quotes. It is one of the quotes that I put up on my whiteboard all the time. And it really, for me, it feels like when somebody says that can't be done, they're absolutely right for themselves because they can't possibly do it. But they don't have any say on whether or not, again, within the rules, they don't have any say on whether or not I can do it because I might be able to find a way. And so when somebody says to me, you can't possibly do that, the four words I say that fueled more of my growth than anything else were, oh, really? Watch me.
yeah. I
So,
love it. Oh, really? Watch me. Yeah. Yeah, I feel it's as a line, I know it goes back to a quick reflection of on the playground, kind of thing. Somebody pushes
mhm.
you down and then you get up and they laugh at you and you're like, no, oh, really watch me, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we I'm sure we all had some moments of that. So maybe the audience can take a little bit of time to reflect, back into the past about a moment as such. So the quote again is those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those who are doing it. So love it. And I think it, ties into the next section where I want to talk about work-life integration and
hmm
caregiver. because this
Hmm.
is a part right now everybody's very much in the phase of sandwich caregivers. You've spoken candidly about integrating career, caregiving, and family responsibilities far beyond the usual work-life balance discussion. That does happen, but maybe not so, depending on, which age group and which phase and stage in your life. Now, you became the primary caregiver for your two aging parents, who have advanced Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, osteoporosis, and glaucoma. So, you know, um, can you tell us what does it look like in real life, especially when life throws curveballs like caregiving at you?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Look, I hate the term work-life balance, by the way. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And I used to be really flippant about, because it inevitably, I would be on a panel, I'd be the only woman on a panel because it was military contracting. And so I'm always the only woman. And I was always the only woman or the only person to get the question about work-life balance. And I used to be really flippant about it and just say, it doesn't exist. Stop trying. But that's not helpful. It may be true, but it's not helpful. And so I started realizing what I was looking for was work-life equilibrium, and kind of going back to like, high school science class and biology. The idea of balance to me is like a teeter-totter where you're in balance and then something happens and you have to put the exact same amount of pressure on the other side again. You can't possibly get into balance unless you're changing actively. To me, that was, and so you go off balance and it's hard to get back in balance. It's not natural to get back in balance. So your natural state is to be off balance. Equilibrium to me is, the idea of like osmosis in a cell. Things move in and out consistently. They're expected to be dynamic. And so the equilibrium is expected to be a flow. And as something gets introduced, it automatically, not quickly, but it automatically starts the process of changing to get back into equilibrium. So equilibrium is more of a driving force as opposed to balance is kind of a disruptive force. So I like equilibrium better because I think it makes you realize that all of this is supposed to be like this. It's not supposed to be perfectly in balance at all times. Um, as a caregiver, my mom, like you said, has advanced Alzheimer's. We are very close to the end of her life. My dad is incredible. He's got advanced Parkinson's, and has broken every bone, literally, I think, in his body at least once. He has the worst case of osteoporosis that the doctor has ever seen, even in the literature. He was like, "Sir, I don't know how you walk and don't break." I'm like, "No, no, he doesn't. He breaks. He breaks all the time." So my mom is kind of physically okay, mentally not there. My dad is mentally amazing and physically just not great. Um, and I have incredible help. We have been able to surround ourselves with caregivers that we pay, but are basically family at this point,
Mm.
that really make sure that they're okay. So I'm the primary caregiver in in the family, but I certainly have lots and lots and lots of help, and we've actively surrounded ourselves with amazing people and have made sure that they stay with us, for as long as they can. We've had some of the caregivers probably 5, 6 years now. Um, and so that, but it's hard. I mean, it's hard to kind of turn to my daughter and be like, I can't deal with this right now because I'm dealing over here, or hey, I've got this book tour thing. Can somebody cover mom and dad because I've got to be here? Or I had to cancel my Denver trip, to do the book tour because my mom got sick. And so, you just, to me, I think the biggest thing I've learned about work-life equilibrium is what I say is you have to ruthlessly curate your priorities
Okay.
and recurate them all the time. And so when there is something that you want to do, is it something that you can do? And there are certain things I think that has to be very, very granular in how you do them. So, if somebody said, what's your priority? Well, my kids are clearly my biggest priority, right? They're always going to be. I don't have to worry about every single, just because my kids are my top priority doesn't mean I have to be top priority for every single thing that happens with them. And so I've been using kind of an old school when they were little. They're they had these spirit weeks in school, right? Where they
Mm,
had to dress head to toe as a cowboy one day, and they had to dress as their, what their future career was and whatever. And some people, and God love them for it, they would dress their kid, they would come up with things months in advance. They would order everything. It was matching head to toe. It was perfect. And there was no way that was ever going to be me. I don't think it would have been even if I had all the time in the world, just because that's not how I'm built. But I would feel guilty about it,
mm,
right? I would be like, oh, my kids. I mean, we had, for most of the years, we had one of our friends who would literally bring an extra costume for my kids because they knew I'd forget, which was great. Get your village to do things for you like that. But I started realizing, because I would look at these Facebook posts and these Instagram posts of these kids looking adorable, and I was like, oh, I wish I could have done that. And then I was like, stop. It's not my priority. It's
mhm.
not, my kids are my priority. Their costumes are not. And so at each stage, I've had to do that where not only do I curate those priorities and really kind of cut everything back that is not a true priority, but then I have to accept that those are my priorities.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing because this triggers this a memory of a talk with somebody about Japanese culture and
Mhm.
it's not representing everybody, but and with respect, of course. I remember the story was that because mothers, parents generally have to pack lunches for their children. So it's kind of quite a competition, which is
Uh-huh.
even the costumes. So the lunch has to be packed nicely. So when the kid goes to school and they open their lunchbox, it has to look like presentable, like somebody actually and then they go into this thing where when they open the box, there's like rice balls, everything looks like perfect. It's kind of like art, right? Because to not have that type of lunch boxes, when you bring to school, that means you're not being cared for, kind of thing, right? So it becomes a competition, and I think
Yes.
that creates quite a tremendous pressure. And of course, exactly what you said, it's you got to really curate your priorities expectations and things that are in alignment with what is for what is I guess fundamentally important for
Yeah,
you, right? So it's
exactly.
not really about other people's norms or expectations that you need to fulfill constantly, right? Because very importantly, this leads us to the next section, which is about breaking free from expectations.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think in an overall sum, like it's there's just such tremendous pressure of these expectations defined by
Yes.
everybody else, but we also need to be mindful that everybody else is not us. We are
Yes.
this one individual, unique person existing in this globe. So we cannot be
Yes.
like everybody else, and that shouldn't be the expectations, right?
Yes.
And how we navigate from situation to situation, whether it be caregiving or whatnot kind of thing, it's all going to be not the same, and that's the
Right.
truth. Right? So, yeah, and and coming back to the military spouse part, right? Because in all honesty, it's often seen through a very limited lens, right? Supporting from the sidelines. But you obviously chose a different path. So I think what are some of the common expectations placed on military spouses that you believe need to be written, maybe
Oh,
rewritten? Yeah.
oh, I've got many. No, I think they have started getting rewritten. And I think actually, look, the military has relied on free spouse labor,
Mhm.
to propel the military for years. And if you look at kind of the models of the military, it expects that the wives, and almost always wives, when they were thinking about it, it's not true because there are plenty of military spouse husbands at home as well, but they expected the wives to be home and supporting and doing. And so almost all of the stuff that should be paid labor and is now becoming paid labor, by the way, finally, was just put on the spouses as volunteering. And there was just no concept that military spouses could and should work. And I think that's changed over the last 20 years. I mean, I certainly heard lots of people say, well, your spouse doesn't have to work. Why are you doing that? But there were a lot of us who were Ivy League trained, had careers, had student loans, by the way, who needed to pay them off, and it just was not feasible. And what happened, or what started happening, is that a lot of the best and brightest military officers and senior enlisted would leave the military because they were married to high-powered, mostly women, who said, I'm not doing this. And so the conversations around the kitchen table became, you're getting out because I'm not doing this with you anymore. I can't. I have to, it's my time to go. And so I think we've changed that culture pretty substantially over the years. I think for the better. I think there are a ton of amazing military spouses out there that are doing this stuff now. I've seen lots of military spouse entrepreneurs. There's groups of military spouse entrepreneurs. There are military spouses. The Secretary of State in Michigan is a military spouse who is running for governor now. They're achieving, and they always have been. They're just a lot more open about their military spouse status while they're making these achievements. So I think it's been great. And I think we are actively changing the face of the military by doing that.
That's a very interesting share about what's going on because if it's not about feeling trapped about what others think one should be doing, it's about, I guess, redefining their own
Yes.
identity,
Yeah.
right? That makes
Yeah.
sense, right? So,
Yeah.
and it's not saying that everybody would want to have a certain path. I mean, they could be okay, they're totally fine with doing the role of what they said.
Whatever. Right.
But yeah, but there should be flexibility of option to redefine the identity and continue to forge ahead to build whatever it is that is in alignment to what they want, right? So
Yes.
I think that flexibility is super important, right? So it's kind of interesting because while you were speaking, I was thinking, what if the military spouse was more defined as in like it could be the woman, right? And then the husband is the military spouse. Like, what if they were told to
There are
just
plenty of
volunteer,
those too. There
right?
really
And
are. I mean, we hired, one of our first hires was a military spouse who had been in the military himself, but he was a military
yes,
spouse. He was a man. Um,
yes.
and he's had a phenomenal career, and followed his spouse around, for a couple of tours, while she was kind of exceeding expectations of the military, and he did his own thing. But it bends the stereotypes when that happens. And I think, look, I'm a big believer in, I don't really care what other people think I should do. I did for a long time. I really did care about what other people thought I should do. I think a lot of women do. I think, I've got a teenage daughter who I'm training very hard to say, whatever they think you should do doesn't matter. What do you think you should do? And I think there is a huge part of us that once we start attaining some power, some prestige, some kind of forward progress in our careers, we think we have to keep going. The next and the next and the next thing kind of comes up. I saw myself doing it this last week where we hit the bestseller list, and I was like, people are telling me, oh, you have to do this now, and now you have to do this, and now you have to do this. And I finally stopped and I was like, stop. I don't want to do that. That's not where I want to go. We said this was what I was doing. This is what I want to do. I don't want to do that. And so I get to choose. And so I think there is a constant push to follow whatever path everyone thinks you should follow. And I think it takes, even for those of us who have been doing it for a while, I realize it takes conscious effort to stop the kind of forward progression that just kind of gets on this treadmill, and you just keep going until you stop and you wait a second, is this what I actually want to do?
Hmm. That's so very true. It's really about designing a hybrid life and a career bridge, right? Kind of thing.
Yes.
Whether, in your life so far, observed, spanning from leadership, entrepreneurship, parenting, caregiving, right? But in doing all those things with intention, right? But,
Yep.
not really just juggling because people perhaps, with good, of course, good intentions say, hey, you need to do this now, you need to top it now, right? Kind of thing. But really thriving across those roles in your own terms,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I think you brought up your teenage daughter, kind of, teaching her the value of just doing what you're comfortable with, knowing your own value and sticking with that, as opposed to, what other friends and groups and new trends and things are telling you to do, right? So I
Yep.
think it's so important for, especially for women too, to continue to move towards a hybrid and self-defined structure. And this
Yep.
hybrid and self-defined structure doesn't have to stay, static. It can
No.
evolve, change, and shift, right? And then, but
Agree.
really knowing and doing with intention. Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's what I'm feeling. And you know, with that in mind, while everything is really powerful and forging ahead and whatnot kind of thing, but all of this takes courage and it takes fear and it takes
Absolutely.
a growth mindset, right? So you talked openly about fear, how it doesn't vanish, but how we learn to move with it. I wanted
Yes.
to ask you the question, were you ever scared during any of these transitions in your life? And
Oh, are
what
you
helped you
kidding? Every
push through?
day.
Yeah.
Every
And the
day.
mindset.
So I talk in the book specifically about a concept that I called rational optimism.
Yeah.
And the chapter title is "What's the worst that can happen, Chicken Little?" And I think I've become an optimist, kind of by nature, with a healthy dose of anxiety kind of coupled on top of it. So I think there is a way to push forward through the fear, by actually embracing the fear first, right? So you first channel the pessimist and figure out what's the worst thing that could happen. And I go, I mean, I'm really good at going into a doom spiral. Like I'm really good at it. So I can come up with the most off the wall crazy things that could happen. And I will do this as an exercise. And I will go through and say, okay, what could happen that could go wrong? And then how do I mitigate that? And so if you go through this doom spiral and say, these are the worst things that could possibly happen, here's all of the ways that this could go wrong. But then you take that next step and say, okay, how do I mitigate that? How likely is it? And how do I mitigate the risk of it? And then does it make sense to move forward through that risk? Because now you've quantified the risk, now you've mitigated the risk, now you know what the risks could be. And sometimes it doesn't make sense to jump into something. And there were plenty of things that everyone told me I should do that I was like, I'm not comfortable with this. I don't like the risk here. And then there were other times when people were like, you're nuts. You can't do this. Like you're going to, smack into a brick wall. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I know what the risks are. I know what you think is going to happen. I'm comfortable that we can make it through this. And even if we don't, it's not going to be catastrophic. And so let's try it. And so if you can quantify those, if you can mitigate those risks, you can take that leap. You can make yourself a little bit more optimistic, but without smacking into as many brick walls as sometimes I used to do, because I would just run straight at them, be like, it's fine, we'll figure it out. So there's a way of quantifying that and balancing that in between.
Yeah, and that's totally true. And I really like that section where you're talking about embracing rational optimism. So, and it's really the practice of expecting progress and solutions not blindly, but with grounded confidence built
Yep.
on effort, perspective, and resilience.
Yep.
Um, and while you were sharing your story, I was thinking about and this is not to say this is everybody's experience, but for example, maybe like the fear of taking a plane, you know, and then going to that dark hole of pessimism, like plane crashes, I just know something
Mm-hmm.
will go wrong. I'm not gonna fly kind of thing. And I guess an irrational optimism would be nothing bad ever happens. I'm totally safe no matter what,
Right.
right?
Right.
Ignores anxiety or dismisses valid
Right.
feelings because we need to acknowledge those
Right.
things. rational optimism would be like, wait, let's look at some stats, right? Because I know air travel statistically has one of the lowest accident rates. My fear is real, acknowledging that, but
Yeah,
I can
absolutely.
prepare. I can practice breathing exercises, choose an aisle seat, listen to calming music, and remind myself that discomfort doesn't mean danger. I can do
And
hard
then
things.
the other
Yeah.
thing I would add to that is what are you missing out on by not doing it? Because what's the flip side, right?
Hmm.
There is a risk here. It's an absolute risk. It's a very small risk, but it's an absolute risk, and it's will you should be acknowledging it. But then what is the risk of not doing it? And what do you miss out on the flip side? Because if missing out on something on the flip side, you're taking a risk to, but you don't, in order to not miss out on the other things that you could possibly do, then that's worth the balance there. And so the idea is figuring out that balance between risk and reward, and making sure you're getting to the reward that you deserve. Because
That's so,
you can probably get to an almost risk-free life. It would be a
it's
horrible life.
it's true. It would be too comfortable. And I think the points to be taken here is not denying that fear,
Yeah,
right? Acknowledging
absolutely.
it and not letting that fear control you. And then
Absolutely.
doing the actions, which is taking practical steps to feel more empowered and
Right.
do what you can. And which leads me to, my next question about what advice do you have for women who overthink or feel paralyzed by uncertainty or fear? Because I know that comes up, especially for younger women, teenagers in this uncertain world we're kind
Yeah.
of just
Yeah.
going on.
So there's a concept in psychology called rumination, which is that constant like overthinking about something and turning it over and over and over in your mind. Um, my both my kids play hockey.
Okay.
Um, and their one of their favorite hockey coaches had a saying that in hockey you have to be like Dory. You have to forget in order, whatever the last play was, you got to get over it in order to move forward. Particularly for whatever reason, if you're in defense, which is what he says. But if you are um, if you are constantly ruminating, look, there are tricks within psychology. I talk about some of them in the book. Um, and I that could probably take an entire new hour of running through those tricks about how to get yourself out of that kind of downward spiral and whatnot. But there are specific tricks to get out of that. But it's okay. It's really okay. Whatever you feel is legitimate. There, you just then have to ask certain questions, and it comes from cognitive behavioral therapy about how likely is this? How can I do this? How can I manage this? So that you can get out of the fear mindset and into an action mindset. Or again, sometimes the fear is legitimate. Sometimes you shouldn't take the action. And so recognizing, and sometimes even if somebody else should take the action, you shouldn't. And
Hmm.
sometimes somebody else shouldn't take the action, but you should. And so figuring out where that comfort zone is for you really takes some kind of mindfulness practices, really takes some psychological training of your own brain and
Hmm.
rewiring of your own brain to make sure you're actively working through what your fears are and making sure that you're again mitigating for those fears.
That's it. And it goes back to, kind of what we were talking about, taking practical steps, right? To feel more empowered,
Yep.
to be less, uncertain, and then to hash out what is reality,
Great.
kind of thing, right? So I think those are very important tips that we can take away from this. I wanted to, go into I know you did a tech talk. Congratulations that I
Thank
watched
you.
it.
That was fun.
Yeah, and there was a section you were talking about, and also in your book too, about imposter syndrome and self-belief, right? Did you ever experience imposter syndrome, even as your company reached 100
Yes.
million in revenue? And
Oh, every
yeah,
day.
every
Every
day?
day. There's a great story. I tell it in the book as well. When I was in graduate school, I was 21. I was brand new in this program. I was in a psychology program, the only woman in my class, which is crazy. And in the social psychology department, there was one female professor. The rest were men. And I was young. I was the youngest in my class, and the youngest in the department. And so I definitely felt like an imposter. So we had a woman, I think from Williams College, come who had done all of the seminal research on imposter syndrome. And at the time, nobody was really talking about the imposter syndrome. This was in like 94, 95. And so she's sitting there talking about the imposter syndrome, and I'm sitting there crunching down going, oh my God, they're going to figure out she's talking about me. Not, and imposter syndrome is the idea that you are worthy of being there, but you don't feel worthy. I was like, no, 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 they're going to figure out I'm actually not worthy. So I totally missed the point of the talk, but I was like, oh my God, they're going to figure it out. At some point when I was in the White House, I started realizing the people who were the loudest, because I thought everyone was smarter than me in the White House, and a lot of them were really, really smart. A lot of them weren't. And honestly, it was the people who were the loudest and the most kind of confident about their rightness that were
Yeah.
often the most wrong. And so I started realizing, hey, wait a second, I've got something to say here. I need to be surrounded by the smartest people in the world. I really want to be. I never want to be the smartest person in any room that I'm in, but I need to own my place within that and be comfortable in the fact that I do deserve to be here. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't feel like I don't deserve to be there sometimes. And it
Mhm.
doesn't feel like it's not that I don't feel like I need to learn more. But the imposter syndrome to me is just a gut check to say, I'm not sure I'm comfortable here yet. Let me go get more information. But once you realize that a whole lot of people around you are making this stuff up as they go along too, okay, you start realizing that it's easier to kind of manage around.
Like you're not alone, right? So,
Not
yeah,
alone.
and just to kind of just, share with the audience again. So, imposter syndrome, as defined, is a psychological pattern where a person doubts their accomplishment and has a persistent fear of being exposed as a fraud despite evident success or qualifications. So, for example, some of the key traits would be like believing your success is due to luck, not
Yes.
because you're capable, or feeling
Yes.
like you don't belong, or are undeserving. And you're constantly fearing that others will find out you're not as capable as they think. And basically, you're kind of downplaying your achievements.
Yes.
So, this is interesting because it affects both men and women. And studies have shown that women, racialized individuals, and high achievers often experience it more intensely,
Yep.
especially in spaces where they're underrepresented, right? Which is, going back to what you were saying, when you start to realize other people are also experiencing this, I think you feel like, yeah, it's more kind of okay, right?
Or the
And
people who aren't experiencing it aren't actually very smart. Like, it's the people who are really smart that experience it. And the
hmm,
people who aren't are the ones that I thought were really smart at first. And then I realized, wait a second, they just have no introspection. They don't know that they don't know this, right? And so, but you said something that I wanted to, because I just kind of have been digging into this a little bit.
yeah,
Some underrepresented groups,
yeah,
particularly Black women, um, don't experience the imposter syndrome the same way. And I found this fascinating. A friend of mine kind of forwarded this to me as I was talking about this at one point and said, hey, wait a second, you might want to like recheck because, and she was a Black woman. She was like, a lot of us don't experience it the same way. So I called a couple of my friends, and one of my best friends is a judge in town. And I called her and I said, do you experience the imposter syndrome? Because I've
hmm,
talked about it with her, talked about it with her before. And I was like, do you experience the imposter syndrome? And she said, I do. And then she was like, wait a second, hold on. What do you mean by imposter syndrome? And so I gave her the same definition basically that you just read. She goes, no, no, no. I actually am. I actually know I deserve to be in every room I've gotten myself into because it took me 10 times more to get there. my imposter syndrome is worrying that everyone else thinks I'm an imposter, not that I think I'm an imposter. And I was like, mind blown, totally rocked my world. I was like, wait a second, you don't experience it the same way I do. And
Huh.
it's because of some of the cultural issues. I mean, but there's a very small positive to the fact that they've been discounted their whole lives, much differently than I think probably white or Asian women have been, because they assume that it's only because of affirmative action that they're there. And so, my friend was like, no, no, I know I deserve to be in every room I go into. And she does, to be clear. She deserves and then some, and she is the smartest one in every room she walks into. And she knows that that's the case because she knows in order to have gotten there, she had to be there. So I thought that was really interesting
Yeah.
that those of us that talk about the imposter syndrome and feel it may be talking past some of the people who have different experiences. I was fascinated by that concept.
I find this fact very fascinating too, and thank you for sharing because it brings, just it brings awareness that imposter syndrome isn't just all about you and feeling what you feel yourself towards yourself, but that you can be confident, but going into the situation and still second guess the achievements, not because you haven't achieved them yourself, because you rightfully have achieved those things, but
Yep.
it's the perception of what other
Yep.
people see you. And that is something that we cannot control,
No.
right? And yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, wow. That's yeah, I think it's pretty much pretty mind-blowing, really,
Yeah,
because
it really was. I was like, wait, what? What? I've been studying this for years. Like, I know about this stuff. I had no idea.
so
So,
it's kind of and I'm very curious how it differently shows up in men and women, like between different groups of people, like
yeah,
how it projects, right? So and then going to culture to culture. Now this is like turning the
I know,
back in my
right? It's
yeah,
it's a little mind-boggling. We could have an
yeah.
entirely other session on
Podcast on
just this.
about this, right? It's like what happens when you go to Japan? What happens when you go to Italy? What happens when you go to Greece?
Yeah,
What happens when you go to different countries all over the
yeah.
globe? And yeah, and wow, that's really fascinating. Now, I wanted to talk about, I guess, along the pathway of,
Uh-huh.
finding yourself, navigating through this imposter syndrome. Um, there was a lot of fear and growth that was happening, right?
Yes,
What fear did you have to confront the most on this journey? And I guess what I really want to understand is, there must have been a lot of moments of self-doubt, right? Like,
sure. Oh, absolutely.
how did you
Yeah, there
push
would.
through all of that?
Um, I mean, I think there was just I know that we're going to figure this out. And look, I knew, and I think this was really critical. I knew we were going to make mistakes. We were going to make lots of mistakes, and we did daily. But I was confident in not only me, but the team that I had put around me, which I think was also really important. So that it
Mm,
wasn't just on my shoulders. Um, but I was confident that we would fix any mistakes as we saw them, that we were humble enough to admit the mistakes that we had, and would work hard enough to fix what we saw. So to me, it was there's an ability to just keep pushing forward, figure it out as we went along. Again, like I said, I've surrounded myself with a whole lot of military guys. They would turn around and say, nobody's shooting at us, right?
mm.
Which is, there's no bullets flying. I'm not dying today. None of this matters that much. And so, whatever it is, we'll figure it out. We're going to get some stuff wrong. That really allowed us to be risky because the stakes, although they were high, they weren't that high.
So having a sort of realistic measurement of things, right?
Yep.
And then knowing how to, I guess, in some ways benchmark that against with what your inner maybe limiting beliefs are, right? And then really what is happening in reality, right? So those are really important things. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think yeah, those are good tips to really just push through. And really it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about entertaining the worst case scenario
Oh,
and
absolutely.
coming back to the room of reality, right? And the likelihood of things happening. It could even relate to what I shared earlier about the fear of, taking a plane, right? And
Yep.
then what it means actually in reality, statistically speaking, right? So that it can be reduced, right?
Right.
Um, I wanted to ask you too, about what you would tell your younger self. So if you could go back and tell your younger self anything, maybe on the day your husband deployed or when you launched your company, what would it be?
Ooh. Um, that's a really great question. I mean, I tell my younger self a lot of things because I have a daughter and a
Yeah.
son, and both of them are kind of my younger selves, but different, very much different. Um, what I would tell myself, I think on the, as the company launched, is was and I tell everyone this over and over and over again. Trust in your village. Believe, ruthlessly curate who is around you. When your gut tells you that something is not working, believe it and take action a little bit faster than you are comfortable doing. So when there's somebody who is in your life that is not supportive, cut them out. When there is someone who gives you, business, a working partner or whatever, or the firms that we would do business with, when they gave me the heebie-jeebies, I oftentimes would kind of talk myself out of it, and inevitably that was the times that we had challenges. So just trust in yourself a lot more, and trust in your gut a lot more because the your gut knows things well before the data will show you, but the data will usually bear it out.
So in essence, it's kind of the truth will reveal itself, will
Yeah.
show up, kind of thing. But
Yeah.
and I love the fact that you talk about the gut feeling because we kind of a lot of times bypass, whether internal or external situations or it's like maybe you're having a pain and you take some painkillers, right? To
Hmm.
deal with it. And then the pain is numbed, right? But there's actually something else going on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But then you kind of brush it off, right? Kind of thing. So that's kind of what I guess what a gut feeling is about, So uh, the the magic the magical part about that is that this trusting your gut instinct is a lifelong like trusting building
Yes.
process that you do
Yes.
with yourself,
Yes.
and you constantly build and grow and strengthen it. Yeah. So and
And
then with time you see that it does make sense to
it
trust yourself.
works, right? And there's a reason that it works. You're seeing things, I think, oftentimes, you're seeing things in patterns that your body is recognizing before your mind recognizes it. And so, and it's important to figure out if your gut is telling you you're nervous or if your gut is telling you there's a warning. Because, doing something nervous is good, right? Being nervous and doing it anyway, that's not a bad thing. In fact, that's what gets you progress. But doing something when your gut is telling you there's a warning, so you have to start learning how to distinguish the warning from the nerves. And that's really critical and that's really tricky. But once you start realizing when your gut gives you a warning, you got to listen to it because your gut usually, honestly, is more sensitive. It's picking up on the same patterns that your brain will pick up on later that the data will show you, but it'll get it in an energy, not woo woo energy, not, just you'll start feeling pieces of things that are coming together, and we're much better at recognizing patterns unconsciously than we are consciously first.
It's so true. And really listen to your body because I think the human body, the human mind is such it's such powerful machines. They're just
Mm,
they're there,
for sure.
and they can tell you a lot of things if you just really sit with yourself and learn about yourself and build a relationship with yourself to continuously learn and grow. Now, Who do you hope to read Unruly? Like, who did you write it for?
It's a really good question, and it's a really hard answer because I really tried to make it universal. I do think it's a kind of universal toolkit. So, certainly women of a certain age that the Gen X kind of women that are pivoting, great. I think this does resonate well with them. I think it does resonate well with younger women as well. I think it resonates with entrepreneurs. I think it resonates with caregivers. I think it there are pieces of it because it's not just for one piece of your life that resonates with a whole lot of people. I mean, I'm giving talks now to Division 1 athletics teams
Uh,
from big name schools, Big Ten because I went to the Big Ten. Um, and that's been really exciting to be able to have those conversations with particularly female athletes that are really at the top of their actual games, and really start talking about some of this stuff, how it relates to both sports but then life. So there's so many different groups that this works for that I didn't write it for any one particular audience, which makes it it was great to write. It's really hard to publicize because I don't have a specific audience that I'm talking to.
yeah. And I think you hit a good point about the readers, who could read your book. But I honestly think anybody can really benefit from this book. And
Thank you.
and I think additionally it actually would be quite powerful for girls too, growing up and navigating kind of thing. So I think it would be helpful for them and equally for men because I think it's interesting to hear the different stories, right? Like
Yeah.
there was a story I think towards near the end of the book about, um, was it the sailor with the boat? Uh,
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
yeah, maybe you could share that story. Yeah, like that was a really good one. And of course it stood to my mind and I'm talking about it now. Like how learning to empathize that we're all in the same boat together as
Yes.
opposed to just being by yourself, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So that story was yeah, it was some wealthy man that had
Oh
controlled.
yeah, so I could tell the story. Yeah, it is. So basically, this jerk in town that owns all of the different pieces of everything in town and says everyone is on their own. I don't, it's not my concern. They can handle it themselves. And he's, just a big jerk. And the only thing he doesn't control are the boats that the boat builder, who's been doing it for generations, builds these boats. So the boat builder goes over to the mean jerky guy and says, "Hey, I'd like to take you out on the boat." And the jerk decides that he might be able to finally buy the boat builder's business so he can control everything. And the boat builder takes a a drill and starts drilling in the boat after they go out into the treacherous waters and starts drilling in the boat. And the jerk says, "What are you doing? You're gonna drill a hole in the boat. You're gonna sink us both." And he said, "Well, I'm drilling it under my seat. It's none of your concern," which is what the jerk had said before to everyone else. "It's none of my concern that I'm doing this. You don't have any concern about it." And so the jerk starts realizing we're all in the same boat. I tell it a little bit better, obviously, in the book, but the idea is we are all in the same boat, and what I do matters to somebody else. What you do matters to me, and we need to think about other people, or else we might be rich up on a hill, but we're never going to have a great life.
Yeah, and I love that share. And there was emphasis in your book about how, once you arrive at a certain point in your life, you can be that mentor and helping others too, right? So bringing
Yeah.
them up, right? And
Yep.
that is exactly the point I want to make. I think this book is for not just one particular group. It actually, can transcend to different groups. And it really is what you can take out of it, because there's
I
so many
appreciate that.
really good points. And for those ready to grab a copy of this book, how can they get one?
It is everywhere you could buy books. Hopefully, it's in your local bookstores. But it's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's on Target. All of the different the places. It's a Simon and Schuster distribution, so you can go on to Simon and Schuster, look up Unruly. But it's on Amazon now. So if that's the easiest place to get it. I am also on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. I've got a newsletter where I write a bunch of other stuff. So sign up on my website, which is laurenwittenbergweiner.com for my newsletter. So I'm all over the place talking about the concepts here and really talking about making the world better by being unruly.
That's amazing. And especially to the woman tuning around the world who are on the edge of their own unruly path. Is there anything else you want to just add one final note to share?
You got this. You've got this. It is hard to break the barriers, it is hard to break the expectations, but man, is it worth it to do it.
Love it, love it. So, and Lauren, I want to thank you very much for your time today. I had a really awesome time chatting with
Me
you.
too.
And it was really empowering, and I hope it's the same for the audiences. And regards to how to get a copy of Lauren's book, I'm going to be sharing all those links with everybody after on Facebook as well as on Instagram. So yeah, thank you again very much for your time, and I want to wish you a beautiful rest of the early evening, afternoon.
You
Yeah,
too, Trey. It was great to talk to you.
it was a pleasure. So thank you so much. Take care, and bye for now. Bye.